night was still and vast, the kind of night where even the hum of the cosmos seemed to quiet in reverence to its own immensity. The stars were out in full force, twinkling like distant lighthouses, guiding wayward thoughts to endless possibilities. For most of Earth, it was another ordinary evening. But for Dr. Elena Ramirez, it was the night that everything changed. Elena sat in her observatory, perched high in the Atacama Desert. The facility, known as Horizon Point, was a marvel of engineering, a dome of glass and steel housing some of the most advanced telescopes on the planet. It was her haven, her sanctuary. Tonight, she was following up on what should have been routine celestial mapping, but what her instruments captured was far from routine. A streak of light flashed across the horizon, brighter and longer than any meteor Elena had ever seen. She adjusted her telescope, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced precision. Her assistant Lucas, a young astrophysicist with a knack for algorithms, looked up from his own workstation. "That's not a meteor," Lucas said, his voice tinged with awe and unease. Elena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were glued to the monitor, where data scrolled faster than she could process. She clicked a few buttons, bringing the anomaly into sharper focus. The object was massive, larger than anything natural they'd ever observed. Its trajectory was controlled, deliberate. "It's slowing down," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "Slowing down? That's impossible," Lucas replied, stepping closer. He peered over her shoulder, his breath catching as he read the data. It's entering orbit." In Washington, D.C., alarms blared in the headquarters of NORAD. General Marcus Hayes strode into the command center, his boots echoing against the tiled floor. The air was thick with urgency as technicians and officers scrambled to analyze the sudden influx of data. "What's the situation?" Hayes barked, his grizzled face set in a grim line. A young officer handed him a tablet. "Unidentified object, sir. It's entered Earth's orbit. Preliminary scans suggest it's artificial." Hayes frowned, his mind racing. "Artificial, as in a satellite?" "Negative, sir. It's too large. Dimensions suggest a vessel." The room fell silent at the word. Vessel. The implications were staggering. Finally, Rebecca answered. "Get the president on the line," Hayes ordered, "and patch me into NASA. I want every eye we've got on this thing." Back at Horizon Point, Elena's heart raced as she continued to analyze the object. It was unlike anything she'd ever encountered. The surface was smooth, almost liquid-like, reflecting starlight in a way that seemed to shift and change. But it was the energy readings that truly confounded her. They were off the charts, fluctuating in patterns that suggested intelligence. "Lucas, are you seeing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lucas nodded, his own monitor displaying similar data. "This isn't just advanced, it's alien." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Alien. The possibility had always been there, a tantalizing mystery for astronomers and dreamers alike. But now, it was no longer a question of if. It was a matter of what and why. End quote. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alert. A transmission was being picked up, a series of tones and pulses emanating from the object. She quickly isolated the signal, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "It's a message," she said, her eyes wide. "It's trying to communicate." Lucas leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "Can we decode it?" "Not yet," Elena replied, "but we can record it. Whatever this is, it's important." In the Situation Room of the White House, President Eleanor Cross stood before a wall of monitors, each displaying live feeds of the anomaly. The room buzzed with activity, advisors and experts discussing theories and strategies. General Hayes briefed her on the latest developments. Madam President, the object appears to be some sort of spacecraft, Hayes said. It's maintaining a stable orbit. No signs of aggression so far. Inspector Antant, tell us again. And the transmission? Cross asked, her tone measured but tense. Still working on decoding it, Hayes replied. Our top linguists and cryptographers are on it. Cross nodded, her mind racing. And the public? We've kept it under wraps for now, said Anne Lynn, the Secretary of State. But it's only a matter of time before someone notices. Then we need answers, and fast, Cross said. I want every resource at our disposal focused on this. If this is contact, we need to be prepared. As the world's governments scrambled to respond, a quiet figure in the Himalayan mountains opened his eyes. Orion, a man cloaked in mystery and wisdom, felt the shift in the cosmos. The artifact he had guarded for decades vibrated faintly, its crystalline surface glowing with an inner light. It was responding to the arrival. Orion rose, his movements fluid and deliberate. He retrieved the artifact, its energy humming in his hands. He had always known this day would come, though he had hoped it might be delayed. The arrival of the Galactic Empire was not the first cosmic event he had foreseen, but it was the most perilous. He activated the artifact, and a map of the stars appeared before him. It pinpointed the location of the anomaly, but it also showed something else. A warning. A force older and more powerful than anything humanity could comprehend. Halliday stepped closer and waited for an answer. The balance is shifting, Horion murmured. And Earth must tread carefully. Days turned into weeks as the world's brightest minds worked to decipher the alien transmission. Elena's team made a breakthrough, identifying patterns that suggested a universal mathematical language. The message, when decoded, was both simple and chilling. We come to observe, do not interfere. The implications were staggering. The object, or rather the beings within it, were here on a mission. But what kind of observation required a vessel of such magnitude? And why had they chosen Earth? Elena was summoned to Washington to brief the president personally. Standing in the Situation Room, she felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on her. Madam President, she began, the message is clear. They're not here to attack, but they're also not here to help. They're watching. Watching what? Cross asked, her tone sharp. We don't know, Elena admitted, but their technology is far beyond ours. If they wanted to harm us, they could have done so already. And the warning? Hayes interjected. Why tell us not to interfere? Elena hesitated. Perhaps they see us as unpredictable, or perhaps there's something they're protecting? Cross nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. Then we proceed with caution. Open a line of communication, but make no aggressive moves. As humanity debated its next steps, Orion's artifact pulsed with increasing intensity. He knew the time had come to act. Descending the mountain, he made his way to a hidden communication hub. Using ancient codes and frequencies known only to him, he sent a message to the alien vessel. You have been warned. The balance must not be disturbed. The response was immediate. The vessel shifted in orbit, its movements precise and deliberate. For a moment, it seemed as though it might leave. But then a new signal emerged, directed not at Orion, but at the entire planet. It was a projection, a holographic figure appearing in the skies above major cities. The figure was tall and otherworldly, its translucent form radiating an aura of authority. It spoke in a voice that resonated across frequencies, understood by all. We are the Watchers. Your world is at a crossroads. Proceed wisely, or face the consequences. And just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished. The world was left in stunned silence, grappling with the weight of its new reality. Humanity had always looked to the stars for answers, but now the stars were looking back. The world stood on edge, caught between awe and apprehension. The arrival of the Watcher's vessel had ignited debates in every corner of the globe, from scientific communities to political war rooms. Yet for all the noise, one question remained unanswered. Why Earth? What? At Horizon Point, Dr. Elena Ramirez was once again at the forefront of humanity's attempts to understand the anomaly. The observatory had become a hub of activity, with data pouring in from satellites, ground-based sensors, and deep space telescopes. Elena's team was overwhelmed but resolute. The Watcher's enigmatic presence demanded answers, and they were determined to find them. "Lucas," Elena called, her voice sharp against the hum of machinery. "What's the status of the spectral analysis?" Lucas, bleary-eyed but focused, looked up from his monitor. "Still compiling. Whatever the vessel is made of, it's not in our periodic table. The material reflects light like a liquid but holds its shape like a solid. It's alien." Elena nodded, her mind racing. She turned back to her own screen, where the decoded transmission from the Watchers scrolled endlessly. "We come to observe. Do not interfere." The words were haunting in their simplicity. What were they observing? And what did interference mean to beings so far beyond human comprehension, from some level astral perspective? We may never come back to Genoa. But she would. In the Situation Room of the White House, President Eleanor Cross presided over a meeting with her top advisors. The tension in the room was palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cross began, her voice steady, "we are facing an unprecedented moment in human history. The Watchers have made their intentions clear, to observe. But what does that mean for us?" General Marcus Hayes leaned forward, his face etched with concern. "Madam President, we can't rule out the possibility that this is a prelude to invasion. They're gauging our capabilities." And Lynn, the Secretary of State, shook her head. "If they wanted to invade, General, they wouldn't need to gauge anything. Their technology is light years ahead of ours. They could have wiped us out the moment they arrived." He nodded reflectively. "I'd said that if the weather were favorable, they could take out 2 of our battle group after us at once. But it wasn't so." "Then why haven't they?" Hayes countered. "What are they waiting for?" "That's what we need to figure out," Cross interjected. She turned to Dr. Rajan Mehta, a leading astrophysicist brought in to consult on the crisis. "Dr. Mehta, any insights?" Mehta adjusted his glasses, his expression thoughtful. "The Watcher's message suggests a directive. They're not here randomly. Something about Earth, or perhaps humanity, warrants their attention." "And the warning?" Cross asked. "What might they consider interference?" Mehta hesitated. "It's hard to say. Their technology and thought processes are likely beyond anything we can understand. But one thing is clear, they value observation. If we act recklessly, we might provoke them." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Cross exhaled slowly. "We proceed with caution. No aggressive moves. Keep the public informed, but control the narrative. And above all, find out what they want." Elena's research team wasn't the only group working tirelessly. Across the globe, nations pooled resources, sharing data and theories in an unprecedented display of unity. The European Space Agency, China's CNSA, and even private space companies like Horizon Dynamics joined the effort. But despite the collaboration, progress was slow. One breakthrough came unexpectedly. As Elena reviewed telemetry data, a faint but distinct energy signature caught her attention. It originated from the vessel but extended outward, forming a web-like pattern across the planet. "Lucas, look at this," she said, pointing to her screen. "The vessel's emitting some kind of field." Lucas frowned, studying the data. "It's almost like a net. But what's it capturing?" Elena's mind raced. "Not capturing, observing. The field's frequency matches the electromagnetic spectrum of human neural activity." "Wait," Lucas said, his eyes widening. "Are you saying they're monitoring us?" "Wait." "Not just us," Elena replied. "Our thoughts, our emotions. They're studying us on a level we can't even begin to comprehend." The realization sent a chill through the room. If the Watchers were peering into humanity's collective psyche, what might they find? And more importantly, what might they do with that knowledge? Good. Far from the bustling observatories and command centers, Orion sat in his Himalayan sanctuary, his artifact glowing faintly. He had been watching the developments closely, his connection to the ancient relic providing insights no one else could access. The artifact was a fragment of something far older than the Watchers, a remnant of a civilization that had once wielded unimaginable power. Orion had spent decades unraveling its secrets, but even he understood only a fraction of its potential. Now it pulsed with urgency, responding to the presence of the Watchers. "You see them, don't you?" Orion murmured, addressing the artifact. "They're not just observers, they're judges." The artifact's glow intensified, projecting a map of the stars onto the chamber walls. At the center was Earth, surrounded by a web of light that mirrored the field emitted by the Watcher's vessel. But the map also showed something else, a disturbance, a ripple in the fabric of space-time. Orion's eyes narrowed. The balance is shifting, and they're here to decide its fate. Back at Horizon Point, Elena's team made another startling discovery. The energy field emitted by the Watcher's vessel wasn't static. It was evolving, adapting to the data it collected. Patterns began to emerge, patterns that mirrored human activity. "It's like they're building a model of us," Lucas said, his voice tinged with unease. "A simulation." Elena's heart sank. If that's true, then they're not just observing, they're testing. "Testing what?" Lucas asked. Elena didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing, connecting dots that she hadn't even realized existed. Finally, she said, "Our capacity for balance." Lucas frowned. "Balance?" "The universe operates on equilibrium," Elena explained. "For every action, there's a reaction. If the Watchers are as advanced as we think, they've likely seen civilizations rise and fall. Maybe they're trying to determine if we're capable of sustaining ourselves without tipping the scales." As the days turned into weeks, the Watchers made no further overt moves. Their vessel remained in orbit, a silent sentinel casting its shadow over the planet. The world adapted, though uneasily. Life continued, but the presence of the Watchers was an ever-present reminder of humanity's precarious place in the cosmos. Then, without warning, the vessel emitted a second transmission. This time it wasn't directed at governments or scientists. It was broadcast across every frequency, appearing simultaneously on every screen and speaker on Earth. The message was brief, but its implications were profound. "The trial begins." Panic erupted worldwide. What did the Watchers mean by trial? Was humanity being judged? And if so, by what criteria? Governments scrambled to maintain order, but the fear was palpable. Historians have since warned about the dangers of too much indecision. At Horizon Point, Elena and her team worked around the clock, analyzing the new transmission. It was Lucas who noticed the anomaly first. "Elena, look at this," he said, pointing to his screen. "The energy field. It's focusing." Elena leaned in, her eyes widening. "On what?" Lucas hesitated. "Not what. Who? The field's focus had narrowed to specific individuals across the globe: scientists, artists, leaders, activists, people who represented the best and worst of humanity. The Watchers weren't just observing humanity as a whole. They were examining its parts. Lena's mind reeled. They're testing us through them. In the Himalayan sanctuary, Orion felt the shift. The artifact pulsed violently, its energy almost overwhelming. He knew what was coming. Death by Carcatula or some other Seward monster. Captain Carpenter shut off his probes. "The trial isn't for them," he said aloud, his voice echoing in the chamber. "It's for us." As the artifact's light intensified, Orion closed his eyes, preparing for what lay ahead. The Watchers were here to determine whether humanity could achieve balance, and the outcome would decide the planet's fate. That was all. No further elaboration, no explanation of how or when, just the unrelenting finality of those 3 words that would reverberate through the core of every human being who heard them. The sheer coldness of the message seemed almost to mock the months of preparation, analysis, and debate that had already taken place since Earth had received its first signal from the Galactic Empire. The world was stunned into silence. Her voice echoed for the briefest of moments. The Immediate Reaction, by Matthew Barham, read by David Lee. Governments around the world reacted immediately. Governments were scrambled, satellites were repositioned, and military forces went on high alert. The United Nations convened yet again, but this time the discussions were far from the calm deliberations of the past. The assembly hall, once filled with diplomatic professionals, was now a cacophony of anxious voices and questions that no one had answers to. "The message is too simple, too direct," said the French ambassador, his face pale. "This isn't a first step to communication. It's an ultimatum. It's a declaration of war," another delegate muttered. "They're coming, and there's nothing we can do to stop them." Elena Voss sat silently, her hands clenched in her lap, her mind racing. The words that had just been transmitted were eerily devoid of emotion, devoid of anything that could be interpreted as a warning or negotiation. It wasn't a question of if they were coming, it was a statement of fact. The Galactic Empire was making their move. Earth was simply in their path. But what did they want? Why now? And, most pressing of all, why had they chosen Earth in the first place? "We need to understand their technology," Elena finally spoke up, her voice steady, though her insides were a storm of emotions. "We need to find a way to talk to them, understand what they're capable of." Roland tried to get past the last resistance, but saw no point. "How?" the American representative scoffed, turning to her. "We don't even know what they are or where they come from. You saw the signal. There's nothing about it that gives us insight into their culture, their motives. It's like they expect us to just bow down." Elena's gaze hardened. "We can't assume that. We can't jump to conclusions based on a few words. If we want to survive, we need to approach this with caution. We need to communicate." But even as she said those words, she realized the bitter irony. Could humanity truly communicate with a civilization so advanced? How could Earth ever hope to understand the motives of a galactic empire that could traverse the stars with ease, while Earth could barely get to Mars? The preparation for war. Back on Earth, the situation escalated. Humanity was no longer just responding to a theoretical threat. They were now preparing for an invasion that might come at any moment. International space defense systems were activated, military satellites repositioned, and Earth's fleets placed on full alert. Earth had a rudimentary defense network, a global missile defense system, space stations armed with experimental energy weapons, and a united military front. but nothing in comparison to the technology that the Galactic Empire seemed to possess. In laboratories and military bases, scientists and strategists worked day and night to develop countermeasures. Teams of experts from across the globe were brought together, pooling their knowledge in the hopes of finding some way to neutralize whatever threat was coming. But it was clear to everyone that Earth's current technological standing was no match for an empire capable of interstellar travel. Despite the overwhelming fear and uncertainty, a sense of determination began to take root. Earth's people were rallying together as they had never done before. Governments issued statements calling for unity. Social media platforms, once rife with division, now carried messages of solidarity. People donated what they could, money, resources, even time, as the planet worked in concert, preparing for the unknown. But beneath the surface of this global unity, there was a dark undercurrent of fear. No one knew how to fight a force like this. How could Earth hope to defend itself against an unknown enemy, one so far beyond their understanding? Elena was acutely aware of the weight of this question. As the world scrambled to ready itself for an eventual conflict, she and her team continued to try to make sense of the signals, to understand the alien empire they were about to face. The message repeats. Days passed, and Earth continued its preparations. Satellites scanned the heavens, attempting to track any movements or signs of the Galactic Empire's arrival. But the Empire's presence remained elusive. It wasn't until another signal arrived, this one more intense and with an almost deliberate pattern, that the team at the International Astrophysical Research Institute realized something even more unsettling. The message was identical to the first. We are coming. This time, there were 3 confirmed cases. But this time, there was a subtle difference. Embedded within the transmission was a faint hum, an oscillation in the signal that felt like a warning. Elena and Marcus Hale worked together to decode it, their minds racing as they tried to catch a shadow in the dark. It was like trying to catch a shadow in the dark. As they ran the signal through their algorithms, Elena noticed something peculiar, a frequency that seemed to fluctuate, almost as if the Empire was testing their response, gauging their reaction. It was too systematic to be random, too intentional to be ignored. "What do you think this means?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with tension. "I don't know," Elena replied, "but I think we're being watched. I think they're studying us, waiting for the right moment." "What?" The possibility that the Galactic Empire might be observing Earth from a distance, studying humanity's reactions, sent a fresh wave of unease through Elena. Were they simply waiting for humanity to crumble under the pressure of fear? Or were they assessing Earth's capabilities to determine how best to annihilate or subjugate the planet? Elena's thoughts were interrupted by an urgent knock on the door. It was the head of global security, General Rafael Ortiz, a man whose calm, authoritative presence had become a fixture in the emergency meetings. "We need to speak with you," he said, his voice grim. "The situation is escalating faster than we anticipated." Elena followed Ortiz out of the lab, her heart pounding. What could be worse than what they already knew? A terrifying revelation. They reached the Central Command Center, a high-tech facility deep within the United Nations headquarters. The room was filled with a dozen military officers and analysts, all working in a frenzy to monitor the increasing disturbances across Earth's defenses. There was a palpable sense of urgency in the air, and Elena could feel the pressure mounting. Ortiz turned to her. "We've just received reports from our satellite network. We're detecting massive energy signatures coming from the edge of the solar system. Something, or someone, is moving toward us." Until Elena's mind raced. If the Galactic Empire was truly on its way, it would be too late to prepare. Humanity's defenses were already strained, and Earth was no match for an advanced empire. She quickly composed herself. "Do we have confirmation?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Not yet," Ortiz said. "But we've been receiving strange electromagnetic pulses that match the frequency of the last signal. It's too synchronized to be coincidental. They're here." The room went silent. Elena felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The Galactic Empire was on its way, and Earth, despite all its preparation, was utterly unprepared for what was about to unfold. The beginning of the end. As the days passed, Earth's military and diplomatic teams continued to work tirelessly to form a unified response. Still, the inevitable truth weighed heavily on everyone. The Galactic Empire had come, and they were going to take Earth. By the time the next message arrived, an ominous, untranslatable hum mixed with fragments of speech, Earth's forces were already beginning to feel the strain. The weight of preparing for an invasion was too much for many, and there were whispers of panic in the streets. Governments began to issue martial law orders. Cities fortified their buildings, and underground bunkers were stocked with supplies. But the vastness of space felt infinitely larger than the human race's capacity to fight back. At the same time, Elena felt the world shifting beneath her feet. She wasn't just a scientist anymore. She was a witness to history unfolding. There would be no going back from this. Whatever happened next would forever change the future of humanity. As the first signs of the Empire's arrival neared, Elena knew that Earth's fate hung in the balance. But even in the face of such an overwhelming threat, there was still one thing she believed with every fiber of her being. The fight for humanity's survival had only just begun. This expanded chapter deepens the sense of global panic and the urgency of Earth's response as the Galactic Empire's threat becomes more imminent. It builds on the uncertainty of how Earth will respond to the seemingly unstoppable force approaching, setting the stage for the conflict ahead. Let me know if you'd like to explore any specific aspects further, or if you'd like to continue the story.